Yes. Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, September the 8th. It is the day after Labor Day. I hope you all had a nice weekend. Today we're going to continue this unit, but about the Renaissance. But before we did that, I want to show you a few things. Yesterday we began talking about examples of art of the Renaissance. We're going to look at a few other things that would be related. Because, once again, there is an art component to the AP Euro exam, and also you need to be able to choose what era did what art, and there are telltales about it. But let's have a look at it. First, let's begin, if you recall, Michelangelo's Pietà. Yes? Pietà, Mary holding the fallen body of Christ. In fact, the term Pietà means the fallen body of Christ. But the Pietà, which is by Michelangelo, sets in the Vatican. There are many. For example, let's have a look here, see what we can come up with. Please tell me I did not erase all those photos. That is just not fair. One sec. All is not lost. Give me a sec. Okay. Yeah, here we go. I'm unhappy, but I had those right in hand. Now, I took this picture in the Art Institute of Chicago that some of us have been fortunate enough to go to, while the rest of you gray middle schoolers went to see the Blue Man Group when you went on your field trip to Chicago. I went on my trip. In fact, I've been to Chicago probably about 6 times, and I never get tired of going. And this is a picture of a Pietà from the Art Institute. It is a terracotta Pietà. I took it specifically for this purpose to, show that there's more than one kind of Pietà. So, here's Mary, here's the fallen body of Christ. And now let me go back to that. Yes, here we go. I took this photo when I was in Gdansk, Poland. This is another Pietà. This church in Gdansk, Poland was actually quite interesting. The church was easily 400, 500 years old. Giant brick cathedral. It was the tallest building in Gdansk. I actually went to the top of the building, could see out to the Baltic Sea. And this statue, if you notice, the walls are white. The thing about Gdansk and most of the other cities of Poland is that during World War II, Poland, see you, Mr. Di Maria, have a good weekend. The thing about Gdansk and most of the other cities of Poland was that they really got hammered in World War II. And you say, well, of course, the Germans bombed Poland in World War II. And yes, that's true. However, when the Nazis bombed conquered Poland in World War II, they were able to conquer Poland in a span of 2 weeks. 2 weeks they were done. And if you know your history, as we will teach you, the same day that the Nazis started invasion of Poland in September 1st, 1939, the Russians also invaded Poland, same day. The Nazis took the western half of Poland. The Russians took the eastern half of Poland. Of course, most of our history books don't talk too much about that. But here's the thing. As you know, at some point in time, Adolf Hitler decided he wanted to conquer Russia. It was part of his grand scheme. And so Poland and Russia and Germany, Soviet Union and Germany go to war. And it was obviously easily the worst mistake that Adolf Hitler ever made, because not only could he not conquer Russia, but to be honest, Russia conquered him. I mean, the problem was, though, from Poland's perspective, the last 2 years of the war, 1944 and 1945, and probably some of 1943, Russia and the Nazis turned Poland into a parking lot. They fought over every inch of Poland, all the cities. Okay, not all the cities. Warsaw and Gdansk. Actually, back then it was called Mr. Fuller. I can't remember the name of what is now called Gdansk. They changed the name, Danzig. Warsaw and Gdansk, and Danzig, whatever you call it, they were leveled. This church, St. Mary's, that we're looking at here, I'm telling you, the thing is ginormous. And it got hit by shelling too. All churches did. They got hit by shelling. You can tell, and I did several churches. I walked through several churches, and they have been restored since then. But they have not been restored as they originally were. That is why, for example, the decoration, basically what happened was, after World War II is over with, the Poles want to go back to church. Of course, and you're writing this down, of course, that the country in the world with the highest percentage of Roman Catholic membership is Poland. Number 2, Ireland. But anyway, the people, when they started, they had to rebuild the church. They could not redecorate the interior like it had been originally done. Too expensive. And so they, as you see here, they whitewashed it. I mean, as you can tell, this beautiful sculpture looks very out of place. And, that's a long way for me to go to tell you a very short story. Okay, let's look at some of these other pictures. Ones we made reference to yesterday. Do you recall, for example, that we talked about something called Judith and Holofernes. I showed you this picture. Judith and Holofernes. Remember I told you that story last Friday about Judith and Holofernes, that sometimes there are common themes, common subjects that artists are, as they're training, have to recreate, and Judith and Holofernes was one of those themes. Well, this is Judith and Holofernes of the Renaissance. The next great art movement is Baroque art. You know what they say, if it's not Baroque, I really messed that joke up, didn't I? If it's not Baroque, don't fix it. Sorry, I'm flustered by this picture thing. And so there we are. And we want to look at some other pictures very quickly. This one. Yes, here we go. This is the most famous depiction of Judith and Holofernes. Now, remember that picture we just saw? Very staid, not a lot of action. Check this one out. Yeah, this is the same story, it depicts the same thing of Judith and Holofernes, where this guy, Holofernes, that's him reclining there on the bed. He was a commander of the Assyrian army. And the woman Judith, that's Judith here with the knife that's separating his head from his shoulders. And that's her servant that's helping her. And yeah, the rest is self-explanatory, except for one thing. Now, the artist, Artemisia Gentiliscia. Okay, and while we're here, let's learn some things, Miss Jasper. For example, one of the things that helps us recognize Baroque art is this. the black background. What does the black background do for us? It draws our attention to what the artist wants us to see in here. Item 2. Artemisia Gentileschi was a female, Italian female, and it was very, very rare for females to get into the arts. But this young lady, her father was an artist, and she really, really stayed after her father. And her father finally relented and said, "Okay, I'll let you train with an artist." And the artist he placed her with, he raped her. Now, that hopefully you can understand might explain the difference between this photo and that photo. Yeah, they both depict the same thing, but they're slightly different. This, in fact, is the most famous of the depictions of the story of Judith and Holofernes, but not the only one. It was a theme that gets kicked around a lot. Give me a sec. This one is by the very famous, where is Caravaggio? Ah, yes. Another Baroque artist is Caravaggio. Now, this is Baroque. See the black background, okay? And basically the same thing's being depicted here. Although Caravaggio, and by the way, he was a great, great, great talented artist, but he was described as what you call a brigand. You say, what's a brigand? He was a carouser. He liked to go to bars and drink way too much and get in fights, and he was responsible for the deaths of numerous people. He was a roughhouser, kind of lived just one barely above the law. And he also liked to put his own picture. And yet he would, then paint subject matter dealing with the Old Testament. That's him right there. And it was very common for artists to put their own, as you know. And so another thing we were talking about yesterday was Michelangelo's David. And once again, I showed you Michelangelo's David. I showed you Donatello's David. And I've seen other depictions of David and Goliath. Let's have a look, shall we? Okay. Peter. Oh, I forgot. I have one more Judith. If you don't mind, one more Judith and Holofernes to show you. That, yes. Once again, what is the artistic style? Answer, Baroque. How do you know? This, the black background. Intended to show, to make you, the viewer of the art, look at what he wants you to see. Yeah. Okay. All right. So back, David. Yeah, here we go. It's in the big words there, Mr. Horton. David and the head of Goliath. Yeah. This I saw at the Cincinnati Art Museum. I don't even know who did it. Once again, though, it's Baroque. But I mean, David and Goliath, very, very popular theme for artists. There, of course, you see David. This, of course, is the head of Goliath with the rock still in his head. So, yeah. And then one more that I also saw at the Art Institute of Chicago. The Art Museum of Cincinnati. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Here we go. David, yes. Yeah. This is at the Art Institute of the Art Museum of Cincinnati. Here is another depiction of David. See the head there. David has the long sword he's putting into a sheath. Okay, let's back away from that for a while, and let's go back to our study guide, shall we? All right. So, in Northern Europe, the Renaissance art took a slightly different slant and was referred to as the Northern Renaissance. Yes, the Northern Renaissance. Simply stated, the Northern Renaissance focused more and more on secular or humanist subjects and less upon Christianity and the classics being Greece and Rome, as their themes. The most well-known school of art was in Flanders, which is in now Belgium, by the way. And you're jotting somewhere that you'll remember this because it will get referenced a lot. What are the Low Countries? Mr. Fuller, the Low Countries? Come on. Mr. Fuller and his sister and his mom and family and I went to Drake's back in the pre-COVID days and just cleaned house in Trivial Pursuit, didn't we, Mr. Fuller? We like trivia. And we did. We cleaned house. I think we got first and they got second. And Mr. Fuller's team got second. But anyway, we did okay. Never be ashamed of being smart, guys. Don't you ever let anyone, embarrass you because you like something. You like to learn something. You like Lord of the Rings. You like Star Wars or Star Trek. You like Harry Potter. Don't ever let anybody, and you are an authority or you're authority on military history, or like Mr. Fuller, you can identify flags in my room. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't you ever let anybody, try to make you feel bad because you like something, you have an interest. An interest is, as long as it's healthy, as long as it's positive, it's a very good thing to have, And what was I talking about? Oh, yes, the Low Countries. Have you answered yet, Mr. Fuller? What are the Low Countries? The Low Countries are 3 countries in Europe, also called the Benelux. Benelux, Benelux countries. And by now, hopefully, you've guessed Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. Why are they called the Low Countries? Elevation. That's a matter of elevation. Yeah. Remember that the Netherlands, one of the most ingenious countries in Europe, retook a significant portion of their farmland from the oceans and did it using only wind power. Drain those marshes and keep those marshes drained through the use of wind, dike, and construction of dikes, of course. The windmills, of course, which they also use not only to pump out water, but also to grind grain. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. So, in the northern part of Europe, the fresco was abandoned because, the climate in Northern Europe is much more damp. Goodness. Back in the good old days, in the 80s, before global warming, and trust me, global warming has had a decided effect upon the climate of Europe. In 1989, I traveled to Europe, and I was in Europe for 3 weeks and spent much of that time, wearing a jacket. Wearing a jacket because it rained literally every other day in the summertime. And in Northern Europe, it really never got that warm. Now, since then, I was in the UK in 2013. The UK, right? United Kingdom, as well as Ireland, England, Wales, Scotland, UK. In 2018, I was in Poland and Hungary and Czech Republic during the summer. And both those times, it was considerably warmer. In fact, it got up in the 90s in Poland and in Budapest when I was there in June. And the problem with that is that Europe is not built for the 90s. They don't have, most places don't have air conditioning. Most places, most businesses don't have air conditioning. They don't need it until now. Yeah. But anyway, so the climate, yeah. The climate during this time in Europe at this time, much rainier, and you had all that dampness. And so frescoes, it didn't help, the frescoes wouldn't dry properly. And so the fresco was abandoned in favor of illuminated manuscripts. That means paper, oil paint on wood panel. Oil paint on wood panel. Say, what's that, Mr. Whitney? Well, look back there. You see that painting that Miss Rumai did for me of the wave? That is acrylic on wood panel. It simply means that the surface upon which the paint is applied is made of wood. That's all. And the other, oil on canvas. Canvas. I never thought I'd say that word so many times in my life, but yes, canvas. What is canvas? Well, obviously, it's a cloth. And what the painters found out that since if they wanted to ship their painting, canvas was very handy because canvas, and basically what canvas is, same thing that they use to make sails. Very thick, absorbent cloth that they would use, and then they would stretch it out in a frame, and that way they could display it. And then when they wanted to transport it, they would simply break the frame down, take the canvas, roll it gently up, slide it into a tube, and protect it. Yeah, I'm sure that you history buffs all know that when the British invaded Washington in the War of 1812, that Dolly Madison saved all the paintings in the White House by doing just that. They were all on canvas, and she saved them. Saved the painting of George Washington. Ah, yes. What is genre painting? Genre painting is a painting that depicts. Well, now they're back. These are back. They're not what I want. That depicts a scene from everyday life, like this one. This is called The Hunter's Return by Peter Bruegel the Elder, and it is part of the Northern Renaissance. And you see, what are we depicting here? Are we depicting God? Are we depicting members of royalty? Are we depicting ancient Greeks or lofty subject matters? No, it's a day in the life of common people in Northern Europe. You see a furnace going over here, hunters returning from the hunt. You can tell all the dogs are depressed because they didn't catch anything. And of course, people down here skating, if it's available. It is. And this, by the way, was supposed to be in Holland. But yeah, that is an example of genre painting, but not the only one, okay? I have others, of course, I do. Let's go here. Here's one. You enjoying this today, Miss Jasper? Very famous, one of the most famous pieces of the Northern Renaissance. And you know what? It's the marriage of Tsunami, Tsunami, and somebody. It gives the title of the painting is the names of these two people and their marriage. And here's the thing. Once again, this painting is tiny. I really think it's like about 30 inches across by maybe 40 inches in height. but they pack so much in it. For example, let's learn some things. Let's learn some things about painting and symbolism. So many of these paintings had symbols that are very subtle. Now, what is this? Yes, it is a dog. Now, in art, dogs are often placed in paintings to represent fidelity. Fidelity. And somebody in the back says, "Oh, I didn't know they had stock trading companies back then." Actually, they did, but that's not what this is about. Fidelity. You know what fidelity is? What is the motto of the United States Marine Corps? Does anyone know? Semper Fi. Semper Fi. Always faithful. Fidelity means faithfulness. And so by having a dog here in the painting, it means that these two people who are getting married will be faithful to one another. I once saw a joke where it talked about this artist, Arnold Feeney, where it says all the people in his art look like Vladimir Putin. Come on, that's funny, right? Putin? That is funny. And let me tell you something else. Look here. This is a mirror. It's a convex mirror. Convex goes out like this. Concave in. Convex out. It's a convex mirror. And we probably can't do it because the quality of this picture is not good enough. But if you could blow it up, let's see what's in the mirror. Look here. See, the artist puts himself in the painting. Interesting, though. I mean, I don't know jack about art. I'm learning all the time. And I surely can't do art like Miss Jasper or people like her can. But I think it's fascinating. It's not just painting dumb pictures. It's about an expression on a medium. Great stuff. Okay. Let's continue. We were talking about genre art, weren't we? Do I have any more genre art pictures? Let's see. Yes. This is another very famous piece, and look what's there. This is another very famous piece. This is the moneylender and money changer and his wife by Quentin Massey's. Another example of the Northern Renaissance, another example of genre art, which depicts everyday people doing everyday things. How about we look into our convex mirror here? Look at that. The hall's dark. But yeah, I mean, isn't that cool? Tell me that's not cool. The artist, and by the way, that's not a big picture. That's not a big picture. And the artist, and I don't know what this is depicting necessarily. I mean, is it the artist? I'll have to look that up. That's cool stuff. Great stuff. But anyway, yeah, the money changer and his wife. Okay. Let me see if I have any others. Oh yes, of course, of course, of course. Another type of Northern Renaissance art, and you need to know what these are. This I took this photo at the Cincinnati Art Museum. This is what is called an altarpiece. How many of you nerds out there, and I'm a nerd, so if I say you're a nerd, it is a compliment. We're both alike. And like I said, don't ever let anybody make fun of you for being smart. But anyway, how many of you have ever seen the film The Monuments Men? It's very good. You should all watch it. I mean, because it's about art, Miss Jasper. And in The Monuments Men, and it's a true story, based on a true story, the United States government and the British government became very concerned about the fact during World War II that the Nazis were going all over Europe, snatching up the greatest pieces of art, sculptures, paintings, altarpieces, from all over Europe. And Hitler was building himself a giant art museum. Napoleon did the same thing, by the way. And so he was snatching up all these incredible pieces of art, and they were hiding them in a location. And they sent this team of American art experts who they had converted into soldiers to go and find them. And during their efforts, a couple of them actually got killed. One of them defending I forget what it's called. It was Michelangelo, a sculpture by Michelangelo, the only one that was displayed in Northern Europe. And the most important one was the Ghent altarpiece. This is not the Ghent altarpiece. But anyway, this is an altarpiece from somewhere in Europe. But what is an altarpiece? An altarpiece is part of a Roman Catholic ceremony, and it sets up, of course, at the front of the church at the altar. And this was actually a type of a storage facility where they would keep the gifts. You say, what gifts? The communion, the bread, and the wine for the function of the communion was kept in a device like this. And during the service, you see, look, you can tell this, if you fold it in, would fit neatly into here. When church is not in session, this would be folded closed to preserve the paintings. And notice that it depicts, of course, scenes from the Bible. This is Adam and Eve. This is the crucifixion of Christ. This here is Abraham about to kill his own son, etc., etc. These are all, like I said, depictions of Bible stories. And it's a type of art you would find in the Northern Renaissance. Okay? And it's an altarpiece. All paintings on wood panel. It is a type of art you see in the Northern Renaissance. And once again, it is so important that you're able to look at a piece of art, not knowing the name necessarily, not knowing the artist necessarily, but be able to recognize the style. Because the style comes with a certain piece of history, you see. And in the Northern Renaissance, the Renaissance had evolved northward from Italy to the rest of Europe. The ideas of the Renaissance spread largely by the printing press. And so, yes, the type of art had also migrated northward. Okay? All right. Know the great artist, Jan van Eyck. Oh, Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride. Albert Dürer, The Adoration of the Magi, Devil, Death, and the Night, which are sketchings. Music in the Renaissance was mostly attached at first to religious exercises. By the way, before I go any further, the Renaissance in Great Britain. The Renaissance in Great Britain. And you're writing the Renaissance in Great Britain. One word, Shakespeare. End of story. I mean, because there was nothing else. Britain didn't do anything in the Renaissance except Shakespeare, which you have to admit was quite a lot. But Shakespeare. So, mostly attached at first to religious exercises, but as time went on, songs and ballads became more and more secular and humanistic in their subjects. I mean, music for a time during the Middle Ages, during the Dark Ages, Music was banned by the Roman Catholic Church. Why? Because it was felt that since the Greeks and Romans liked to dance and liked to play music at their parties and orgies, then obviously music has to be from Satan. And they banned it for a while, and then it began to make inroads back into church and then outside the church. The same thing with theater, by the way. When Christianity first took over everything, and one of the first things they did was to ban theater, because the Greeks and Romans had theater, and in Greek and Roman theater, they had live sex acts on stage. They had, of course, had very risque subjects. They had human sacrifices on stage, many of whom were Christians. And so the Roman Catholic Church said, no, that must be of Satan. We ain't doing it. Plays are of the devil. Fact of the matter is, for the longest time, actors could not even receive communion, and this lasted for quite some time. Okay, the Gregorian chant. What is the Gregorian chant? Basically that, a group of people chanting something in monotone without musical accompaniment. Gregorian chant. Guillaume Dufay was a Renaissance era musician. A madrigal was a type of Renaissance music. Okay, enough of that. All right, now let's talk about politics. In the first half of the 14th century, Europe continued to decline into a hodgepodge network of warring feudalistic states with no strong national governments emerging. Okay. You say, Mr. Horton, your big words are confusing me. Please stop it. Yes. Yes. What that means is Europe, as it says there, first half of the 14th century, from 1300 to 1350, Europe was like a giant patchwork quilt of hundreds, if not thousands, of little tiny feudalistic states who spent most of their time fighting each other. Very weak, very disorganized, very disunited. But then in the second half of that same century, from 1350 onward, three countries. You better remember England, France, and Spain, because I've seen it on a test somewhere. England, France, and Spain began to establish national identities. In other words, these were the first modern European countries. England, France, and Spain. Modern, they began in the 14th century. Modern, Two began establish national boundaries and were able to extend power and influence into expanding borders. These were called the new monarchies. C. Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe remained weak and disunited and still lived under the constant threat of invasion, particularly from the Ottoman Turks. Okay. In France, the cessation. I like big words, and I cannot lie. That's one of my songs that I wrote. I like big words, and I cannot lie, by Johnny Got Thesaurus. Get it? Johnny Got Thesaurus. So, in France, the cessation, that means the ending of the 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War. What was this? Interesting, the 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War was a war between France and England that lasted off and on about 100 years. Ta-da, hence the name. What was the 100 Years' War about? Well, the 100 Years' War occurred, and I don't even remember the name of the French king, not really important, but one French king died. And it's important for you to know this because this is going to become a thing in European history. French king died without an heir, a male heir. And so the English king since he was a descendant of William the Conqueror, who had been a Frenchman. The English king was a descendant of this guy, William the Conqueror. Interestingly enough, William the Conqueror, who conquered England do you remember the year, Mr. Fuller? 1066, Battle of Hastings? Yeah, that year. That was the last year England was invaded. But anyway, William the Conqueror invaded and conquered England. What's funny is William the Conqueror was also called William the Bastard, which meant that he really wasn't accepted as a member of the French royal family. But yeah, so the English king said, you know what, I'm related to the French king by some long, convoluted way. Therefore, I should be the king of France as well. I should be king of England, and I should be king of France. And so this king launched an invasion of France. Thus began the 100 Years' War, a war that went on and off, like I said, for 100 years, and had a lot of interesting personalities in it, interesting occurrences in it, such as Joan of Arc. Who is Joan of Arc? Joan of Arc, in your writing, is the patron saint of France. Yeah. Most European countries have a patron saint. For Ireland, the patron saint is, come on, patron saint of Ireland. Patron saint of Ireland. March 17th. Getting warmer? Yeah, St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland because he was the person who brought Christianity to Ireland. Of course, the legend goes he drove all the poisonous snakes out of Ireland. And if you're ever wondering, what is the national symbol of Ireland? If you're ever wondering why the national symbol of Ireland is the shamrock, the three-leaf clover, it is because, according to the story, St. Patrick, upon meeting the Gaelic pagan king of Ireland, used the three-leaf clover to explain to the pagan king the three-headed nature of God in Christianity: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Yeah. Joan of Arc was a young girl who said one day God came and talked to her and said, you need to lead the forces of France against the British because they're going to take over the country. And somehow she persuaded the king to do that. And then she actually won, and that king, being ever grateful to her, allowed the British to capture her and burn her at the stake as a witch. I mean, it's really kind of interesting how Joan of Arc died. Be with you a minute. Okay. How Joan of Arc died. Yeah, so she was burned at the stake as a witch. I mean, it's terrible because what they did, okay, they accused her of witchcraft, and then they told her, all right, if you just confess to witchcraft, we'll let you go. And so she confessed, and they said, we're lying, and they burned at the stake. But you're a witch, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, another thing to come out of it was the beginning of the end of Knights in Armor. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to begin with this, Roman numeral 19, tomorrow, shall we? We'll begin with Roman numeral 19 tomorrow. That's good. I've talked too much today. I'm going to go. My wife is calling me. She's such a good person. She's worried about me. It's 3:40 in the afternoon. But yes, all right, I'm going to go, and I will talk to you later. I hope that you all have a good day. So hasta la vista, baby. Save, get rid of that. And give me a sec. There it is. I'm gonna stop.